April 2024, a bustling airport in America. It was a routine evening, with passengers eagerly awaiting flights to different destinations. Among the crowd was a black family, a husband, wife, and their 2 young daughters. Dressed modestly, they moved with a quiet grace, carrying their bags and navigating the busy terminal. Unbeknownst to everyone, this family wasn't ordinary. They were the owners of the very airline they were flying with that night. However, they kept a low profile, their appearance giving no hint of their prestigious status. The airport was alive with activity. Passengers hustled through security checks, announcements echoed through the halls, and tired travelers sought seats near the boarding gates. The family found their way to Gate 15, where the flight dispatcher, a stern-faced woman with a sharp gaze, managed the crowd. She appeared irritated, her tone clipped as she gave instructions. As the family approached, their simple demeanor didn't escape the dispatcher's notice. To her, they looked like ordinary passengers, perhaps too ordinary for the first-class section. Her disdainful glance lingered on them before she turned back to her clipboard, muttering under her breath. "Excuse me," the father said politely. "Is this the boarding gate for the flight to Dallas?" The dispatcher barely looked up. "Yeah, but first-class passengers board later. You'll need to wait." Her tone was dismissive, her words laced with assumption. The wife's brow furrowed, but her husband placed a calming hand on her arm. "We have first-class tickets," he said, holding them up. The dispatcher's expression darkened. "First class?" she repeated skeptically. "Let me see those." As she scrutinized the tickets, her demeanor became colder. "These must be a mistake," she said. "I'll check with my supervisor." The family exchanged uneasy glances. The tension in the air was palpable. Around them, other passengers began to take notice. What should have been a straightforward check-in process was becoming something much more unsettling. Little did anyone know, this confrontation was just the beginning of a night that would change everything. The family waited patiently as the dispatcher walked away to verify their tickets. Whispers buzzed among the waiting passengers. Some exchanged glances, curious about the brewing tension. "Do you think they're really first class?" someone muttered. "Probably not. People always try their luck," another replied. The dispatcher returned, her expression still unfriendly. She handed the tickets back curtly. "Fine, these are valid. But next time, make sure you're at the right gate." Her words were accompanied by a dismissive wave. The wife's eyes flashed with anger. "We followed the instructions on our tickets," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Look, I don't have time for this," the dispatcher snapped. "Just take your seats when your group is called." Before the family could respond, the dispatcher turned her attention to another passenger. The mother took a deep breath, pulling her daughters closer. "Let it go," the husband whispered. "We'll deal with it later." But fate had other plans. Moments later, during boarding, the dispatcher confronted the family again. This time, she accused them of taking too long to settle into their seats. "If you're not ready to fly, you can leave," she said harshly. Her words carried loudly, drawing the attention of nearby passengers. The wife, now visibly upset, stood her ground. "We've done nothing wrong. You're treating us unfairly." The dispatcher's response was shocking. She raised her hand and slapped the wife's cheek, her anger boiling over. Gasps filled the cabin as passengers froze in disbelief. The wife staggered back, her husband catching her just in time. "That's enough!" he shouted. For a moment, the plane fell silent. The tension was electric, and everyone could feel it. What had started as subtle prejudice had exploded into outright violence. Yet the night's surprises were far from over. The atmosphere aboard the plane was thick with tension. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, murmurs spreading like wildfire through the cabin. The black family sat in silence, the wife's cheek still red from the slap. Her husband held her hand tightly, their daughters clinging to her arms in fear and confusion. Moments later, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We'll be taking off shortly. Before we do, there's an important announcement." The passengers perked up, curiosity overtaking their unease. The captain continued, "Tonight, we have the honor of hosting very special passengers. The owners of this airline are traveling with us. We are deeply grateful for their presence." A ripple of shock passed through the cabin. Heads turned toward the black family, realization dawning on faces. Gasps and whispers filled the air. "The owners?" a woman said incredulously. "It can't be," a man muttered, staring at the family. The dispatcher, still standing near the first-class section, froze in place. Her face turned pale as her gaze locked on the family. The weight of her actions hit her like a freight train. Her lips trembled, and she stammered, I didn't know." The husband stood slowly, his calm demeanor commanding the room. "Thank you, Captain," he said. "Yes, we are the owners of this airline. My wife and I built this company with the belief that every passenger deserves dignity and respect." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The dispatcher's knees seemed to buckle under the weight of her guilt. Passengers began clapping, their applause filling the cabin. But the husband wasn't done. Turning to the dispatcher, he said, "We'll speak after the flight. For now, we suggest you reflect on how you've treated people today." The dispatcher's eyes filled with tears as she nodded silently. The family sat down, and the applause continued. The flight was about to begin, but the journey had already changed everyone on board. The plane ascended into the night sky, the hum of the engines steady but subdued compared to the tense atmosphere in the cabin. The black family sat quietly, the wife gazing out the window, her hand intertwined with her husband's. Their daughters, nestled between them, leaned into their mother for comfort. The passengers, still processing the announcement, were unusually quiet. The dispatcher sat in her jump seat near the cockpit, her head lowered in shame. Her mind raced with guilt and regret, replaying her earlier actions. She had always been strict, sometimes harsh, but she had never faced consequences like this. The realization of her prejudice and the harm it caused gnawed at her conscience. In first class, a man leaned over to his wife, whispering, "Can you believe they own the airline?" "I feel terrible for judging them earlier." His wife nodded, her expression remorseful. Across the aisle, another passenger, a young woman with headphones around her neck, took out her phone and began typing furiously. "What are you doing?" her seatmate asked. "Posting about this. People need to know what just happened," she replied. The ripple effect of the dispatcher's actions and the family's revelation was already spreading beyond the cabin. Conversations quietly erupted among passengers, a mix of self-reflection and shared disbelief. The captain, sensing the unease, addressed the passengers again. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience earlier. Let's all make this flight a peaceful one. Remember, respect and kindness should guide us all." His words, though brief, resonated deeply with many on board. The dispatcher's eyes brimmed with tears as she overheard the captain's message. She wiped them away, determined to apologize formally before the flight ended. The family, unaware of her inner turmoil, remained composed, their presence radiating quiet strength. The flight continued, but the lesson of the evening lingered heavily in the air, changing hearts and minds one by one. As the flight steadied, the dispatcher found herself unable to sit still. She unbuckled her seatbelt and walked toward the family. Her hands trembled slightly, but her resolve was firm. The passenger's eyes followed her, curious about what would happen next. The husband looked up as she approached, his expression neutral but alert. The wife, still nursing the sting of the slap, straightened slightly, protective of her daughters. The dispatcher stopped a few feet away, her voice faltering as she began. "I want to apologize," she said, her voice barely audible. "What I did was wrong and unforgivable. I had no right to treat you the way I did. The family exchanged glances. The husband nodded for her to continue. "I've been working in this job for years, and somewhere along the way I forgot how to treat people with dignity," she admitted. "It's no excuse, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Truly." The wife's gaze softened slightly. "What made you think it was okay to act that way?" she asked. The dispatcher hesitated, then spoke candidly. "I judged you based on appearances. I assumed things I had no right to assume. I've realized tonight how much harm those assumptions can cause." The husband spoke then, his tone calm but firm. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong, but understand that words alone aren't enough. Change requires action. Will you commit to that?" The dispatcher nodded earnestly. "I will. I promise." The wife, after a long pause, said, "We forgive you. But remember, this isn't just about us. You owe it to yourself and everyone you meet to do better." The dispatcher's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you. I won't forget this." The passengers, overhearing the exchange, began clapping softly. The family's grace in the face of prejudice inspired admiration, leaving a lasting impact on everyone who witnessed it. The rest of the flight unfolded peacefully, but the events of the evening left an indelible mark. Passengers reflected on their own biases, some making quiet resolutions to change. One passenger, the young woman with headphones, posted a heartfelt account of the incident on social media. Her post quickly gained traction, sparking widespread discussions about prejudice and accountability. The dispatcher, though still grappling with guilt, felt a flicker of hope. She resolved to attend diversity and inclusion training and to advocate for better policies within the airline. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but the family's forgiveness gave her the courage to start anew. The family, meanwhile, remained composed throughout the remainder of the journey. They exchanged quiet words with passengers who approached them, offering smiles and reassurances. Their dignity in the face of adversity became a source of inspiration for all who encountered them. When the plane landed, passengers disembarked with a sense of unity. Some paused to thank the family for their example, while others carried the lessons of the evening with them, vowing to act with greater empathy and understanding in their own lives. The family's story spread like wildfire. The young passenger's social media post gained millions of views within days, sparking conversations about systemic biases in the airline industry and beyond. News outlets picked up the story, and the family's poise under pressure became a symbol of grace and resilience. The airline released a statement acknowledging the incident and pledging to implement new policies to prevent similar occurrences. "We are deeply sorry for the actions of one of our employees and are committed to ensuring that all passengers are treated with respect and dignity," the CEO announced during a press conference. The dispatcher, true to her word, began attending training programs and sharing her story as a cautionary tale. She was met with mixed reactions, but her sincerity and efforts to change gradually earned her respect from her colleagues. She became an advocate for inclusion and diversity, determined to make amends for her past actions. Meanwhile, the family continued their work quietly, avoiding the media spotlight. When approached for interviews, the husband would say, "This isn't about us. It's about creating a world where everyone is treated equally." The dispatcher's journey of redemption brought her face to face with other employees who had experienced or perpetuated biases. She organized workshops, inviting colleagues to share their experiences and reflect on the culture within the airline. Many employees found her courage to confront her mistakes inspiring and joined her efforts. The airline partnered with organizations specializing in diversity and inclusion training, creating a comprehensive program for employees at all levels. The CEO, deeply moved by the family's story, personally attended the first workshop, setting an example for the entire organization. The dispatcher reached out to the family privately, updating them on her progress. The husband's response was brief but encouraging. "Keep going. Change takes time, but it's worth it." The incident led the airline's owners to reevaluate their leadership strategies. The husband and wife began holding regular town halls with employees, creating an open forum for discussing challenges and improvements. Employees felt more valued and heard, leading to increased morale and commitment to the airline's mission. Passengers also noticed the changes. The airline's customer service improved significantly, with flight attendants receiving training on empathy and conflict resolution. Surveys showed a marked increase in passenger satisfaction, and the airline became known for its commitment to treating everyone with respect, regardless of their background. Months later, the family boarded another flight, this time as anonymous passengers once more. The dispatcher, now promoted to a leadership role, oversaw operations from the terminal. She spotted the family, but chose to respect their privacy, offering only a grateful smile from afar. The flight was smooth, with passengers and crew working harmoniously. As the plane touched down, the family's youngest daughter looked up at her mother and asked, "Why do people clap when the plane lands?" The mother smiled. "Because they're happy. They're celebrating something good." And indeed, there was much to celebrate. A single night had sparked a wave of change, proving that even in moments of darkness, grace and courage could light the way forward.